Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Welcome in to another edition of the JMU Sports News Podcast. I am Bennett Conlon, joined by Jack Fitzpatrick. Jack, we are 1 week away from game week.
Are you ready? Are you ready?
I'm amped up.
Are you ready?
I would say I'm ready.
Fall camp, you've progressed the way you want to get to. You've progressed through fall camp, and you've gotten to where you need to be.
We've made progress. Look, I'm not satisfied. Okay, we're not satisfied, but we are progressing the way that we like.
Wait, that was such a weird comment from Kurt Sigley where he's like, we're doing everything we want to do, but like we're not satisfied.
Not enough, though.
Okay. I understand what you're getting at, but Kurt, you're doing everything. What else do you need to do?
Some great coach speak, no doubt.
Yeah. BetOnline is your number one source for all of your betting needs. Get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. BetOnline continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting and your favorite casino and card games. Bennett, what's your favorite casino and or card game?
Dude, maybe just a standard slot machine for me.
I'm blackjack. I'm blackjack.
Oh, okay.
They're all of that. Slot games, blackjack, whatever you want is available to play from your phone. Head to the website today. That's betonline.ag, or use your mobile device to sign up. And when you sign up with our promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, scrolling along the bottom as well, you'll get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. So use promo code BLEAV when you sign up. Bet online. It's where the game starts.
Heck yeah. One of our many supporters this year. We also have Three Notch once again contributing.
It's shocking that they were like, you know who we want to partner with again?
Us. What are the chances?
And some awesome stuff coming in the this year at Bridgeford from Three Notch. I don't know if we can say it, but it's going to be
pretty soon, right? Well, I guess the games will start soon, so then we're certainly in the clear at that point. But
didn't you get it?
Yeah,
you have it in your house right now.
Does that? Yeah. So we're basically in the clear with that. But we're super excited about Three Notch, having them on board. We love their beer. We will be visiting there, I'm sure, many times across Virginia throughout the fall.
Yeah, as of right now, we'll have a live podcast recording App State weekend in the Three Notch Valley Collab House tap room. So we'll be doing that. Time hasn't been nailed down, a specific date. I'd imagine it'll be the Friday evening before game day, but we probably still have to figure that out and all of that good stuff. But yeah, I mean, I'm going to try and get up to Harrisonburg for a game before App State and drink my body weight in Duke of Clouds and pour some shandy on me.
I love that for you.
Yeah, it's not healthy for my liver. And we're also sponsored by Christopher William Jewelers.
There's a reason Christopher William Jewelers has been voted best of Virginia year after year. It's not just one thing that sets us apart. It's everything. It's the selection, extensive and unmatched, with every engagement ring, loose diamond, and fashion jewelry chosen for quality and brilliance. It's the service. From our diamond experts to our master goldsmith, our team shares a passion for what they do, and it shows. It's the atmosphere, both glamorous and laid back. See for yourself why people can't stop talking about Christopher William Jewelers in Harrisonburg and Weir's Cave.
So when they say picked for brilliance, do they mean like picked like who's the smartest diamond, or
maybe the most shiny?
All right. How do you want to start today's podcast? We have a lot of stuff coming up.
We do have a lot.
I think this is our most packed episode. Probably we should have like figured out how to like sprinkle in this content over a few podcasts, but we said screw that. We're going to put it all into one.
Yeah, there was a risky decision by us, but one that I think will be engaging for sure. Yes. A lot to talk about.
So we'll start with a little bit of camp talk, which will take us into quarterback talk because that's where everything naturally dissolves into. And then we have an awesome interview with Grimsley High School's head coach, Darryl Brown, also just so happened to be Alonza Barnett's high school coach. I mean, when we picked to interview a random high school coach, it just so happened that it was Alonza Barnett's high school
Got
coach.
lucky there.
Yeah,
got lucky there.
Really
sure,
lucky
yeah.
there. But no, it's an awesome conversation with him. He really breaks down Alonza's play style, his mentality, and what he was like in high school. And I think that's the closest thing we can get to what we could maybe expect. QB1 still hasn't been decided, but a great discussion with him. And then we'll go our game-by-game breakdown after that, and then we will wrap things up with an awesome interview we had earlier today with Greg Madia, beat writer, UVA, Daily Progress. Greg Madia, former JMU beat writer. It was awesome. I think I've said awesome way too many times here in the first 6 minutes of this podcast. It was a great time talking with him, giving us insights into UVA football and just being able to kind of talk with Greg, something we haven't been able to do in a few years now.
He's one of my favorite beat reporters, and I follow a lot like across sports and across different levels. Just so steady, so solid, right? I feel like he says yes to like every interview request, and he's just very good at what he does. We certainly miss him in Harrisonburg. He's doing a great job for the Daily Progress covering UVA, and I'm looking forward to his coverage of that game for sure, but then his coverage the rest of the year covering sports in Virginia is really phenomenal.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear about his trip to Nashville for UVA, Tennessee.
That'll be an interesting one for sure.
All right, so JMU camp chatter.
I don't know that I've really. So camp is over, right? Camp ended on Tuesday. They have a couple practices. It sounded like Thursday, Friday that I guess are technically not camp because classes have started, which I think is how camp works.
Yes.
I don't know that I know anything more about this team than I did when camp started. Very limited, like, knowledge gained, I would say.
I would agree with that. We came in with a few major questions. I think you could talk. Mostly all of them were about the quarterback. We didn't really know who was even. We didn't know if it was. We kind of knew it was a two-man battle based off of the Sun Belt Media Day comments from Cignetti. But like going into it, it was between McLeod and Barnett, and we thought we'd get some sort of clarity by this time in camp or post-camp, and we now know it's either Barnett or McLeod. In Noah's article today that he posted kind of as a fall camp recap, did say that Cignetti wasn't really allowing questions of the quarterback position. We could probably have an entire podcast and see if like a competitive advantage is actually a real thing or not. But apparently Cignetti and the JMU football program stonewalled any questions you could even think about having on quarterbacks, which I think is just kind of insanity. But we don't know that question. And what other questions did we have coming into this year?
Wide receiver, we learned that Tajay Hudson will probably contribute.
Reggie Brown isn't as good. I learned there were injuries specifically to the secondary, which I will say scares me quite a bit because this is a secondary that we wanted to get more reps in camp. We wanted this secondary to have a little bit more cohesiveness, a little bit more continuity. And it seems like the exact opposite actually happened. But I do know a hell of a lot about Devin Coles.
They have like little injuries though, right? So nothing serious, which is good. UVA's got some guys that are dealing with like some legitimate injuries. Doesn't seem like JMU has any like long-term or anything like that, which is good. But I don't really know anything. I don't know like who the backups are at defensive tackle. I have no idea what the cornerback rotation will be other than what I already knew of like Coles, Logan, Austin probably makes sense in that room. I don't know what they're going to do with the 3 starting safeties. I don't know who the new long snapper is. I don't know if Camden Wise has gotten more consistent as a field goal kicker.
I don't know if Kaylon Black is 100% healthy. I don't know.
I think he's healthy.
I don't know if Tyson Lawton will be ready to go week 1. I don't know if
that was unclear.
I don't know if the running back room, how that like carry is going to split because apparently you have 3 guys that are all extremely good. I don't know is Latrell the go-to back, and is Kalon the one that's going to get the big plays? How's tight? Like,
do they have a competition at kick returner or punt returner? Like, I literally don't know anything compared to the start of camp, which is insanity. Kind of surprising to me, but it makes it hard to know what we're going to expect. Like the two deep, like if you study a bunch of other programs and sort of like their camp reporting or whatever, you can pretty much like know the two deep. I feel like the two deep might be more revealing than anything we've heard in camp in terms of just solidifying certain things. And then we're gonna have the Bucknell game will end up actually being incredibly insightful for a number of reasons. Of quarterback, of course, but then a bunch of other positions because we literally don't know anything from camp, in my opinion.
I mean, I still think that we're going to leave the Bucknell game with a just massive question mark over the one question we want an answer to. Like,
I've changed my tune there. We'll have to. Might be time for our quarterback.
I guess we can just dive into quarterback chatter now. I mean, there's so much around this. You've done some deep diving into stats, into things to kind of contextualize how crazy it'll be if Barnett wins this competition. But just to kind of set the stage yet again, McLeod, Barnett in a quarterback competition. McLeod balled out at South Florida. He got better from year one to year two. He goes and transfers to Arizona, a Pac-12 team, plays really well against UCLA, ends up breaking his knee and ankle, and he really hasn't played football for nearly 2 years. He's facing off against Alonza Barnett, who's a redshirt freshman. Seems like they kind of pocketed him last year to keep that red shirt, so he'll have more college eligibility. And that's where we are. It's a competition between the two of them.
Yeah, they haven't. I don't think Curt Cignetti has uttered Jordan McLeod's name in August. Well, publicly in August. I'm sure behind the scenes he's said Jordan McLeod, but he has not said it publicly this month, I don't think.
You know what was a really interesting, I think, offhand comment from Greg? I don't know if he said it during the conversation or post.
It was after.
But like when he was like, "Oh, he'll hint at it though."
Oh no, sorry, that one was during, and then he had made another one after. Yeah.
Okay, but like he said, he'll hint at, and we kind of know Cignetti is this. He tries to play mind games and whatever it is. But like with Greg saying that, it did kind of make me realize, oh, all of these Barnett name drops are hints that he's going to start week one.
I feel the same way, right? He last scrimmage and he mentions the passing game has improved. He mentioned one quarterback name, and it was Alonza Barnett. So if he doesn't start Alonza Barnett because of the way the narrative is shaping out, if Jordan McLeod starts and struggles at all against Virginia, Troy, Utah State, South Alabama, everyone is going to want to see what Alonza Barnett looks like.
It's also what QB Spotlight Stephen Hamner talked about earlier a few episodes ago, where if you do have this quarterback competition, you need to leave them on a long leash. And the way he's kind of positioned, specifically Jordan McLeod, if McLeod is the winner, JMU fans won't let that leash be long.
Yeah, I would say that April me is very surprised that Alonza Barnett looks like he's going to be the starting quarterback. But like
July me is shocked.
But August 23rd would be stunned if it's Jordan McLeod now, based on what we've heard. Like unless something changes here in the next week, Alonza Barnett, based on the comments, right? We really don't have much information. Kind of seems like it's going to be Barnett's team.
Okay, can you contextualize that? Because he is a red shirt freshman with no starting experience, with one pass attempt that probably wasn't meant to be a pass attempt. That was probably supposed to be a handoff, but somehow the play came in wrong, and Barnett threw the ball. So, like, can you tell me how insane it is that a team that the fan base believes is a top 25 caliber team, a team that the fan base and honestly the coaching staff believes can contend for the Sun Belt East? How crazy is it that they are going to start a red shirt freshman?
I mean, it's insanity. His one pass, we've got one career pass attempt. It was in the last 2 minutes of the game against Norfolk State last year. So again, like kind of weird that they were throwing it. but like that's his only pass attempt. He completed it for 14 yards, but surprising that you would have a quarterback who's only had one career pass attempt start. So I did some digging here, right? Given the idea that JMU is this elite program, and I think you can sort of debate sort of what elite means, but at the group of 5 level, they look like a pretty solid team. Last year, and I thought this was just interesting in general, 51 teams appeared in the AP top 25.
That's
so
a lot.
That's a lot of teams. So I know JMU fans are like, top 25, got in the top 25 for a week. That doesn't mean like you're one of the 25 best teams in college football, because 51 teams at one point in the season, either preseason or later in the year, were in that poll. Of those teams, so obviously JMU is one of the 51. There are 50 other teams. So I went through, and a lot of the quarterbacks are kind of well known for these teams. Other ones, like the team has announced who the starter is. There's only like 3 or 4 that are in JMU's boat of like people don't know who the starter is, which is kind of fascinating in general. We're talking about the competitive advantage. It's like, well, if every team has named a starting quarterback, I don't think that like it's actually a competitive advantage. But anyway, I guess you could argue the flip side. But 50 teams that were ranked in the top 25 last year. Of those, none of them plan to start a freshman or a redshirt freshman at quarterback in 2023, with I think there's one exception, or at least one battle where there's a freshman in the mix, but he's not expected to be the guy. So there's 50 teams. None of those teams are looking at freshmen or redshirt freshmen. 2 of them are definitely going to start true sophomores, so guys in their second collegiate season, which is the same as Barnett. Obviously a little different. These 2 guys are Drew Alar, I believe it is, at Penn State, and Cade Klubnik of Clemson. Both of them former 5-star recruits. Both of them played significant snaps for their respective Power 5 team last season. Both of them are viewed as like either Heisman candidates this year or in the future, or like NFL draft picks. So it's like upper echelon, like coming out of high school, this guy was a stud and now plays for an elite Power 5 team. Both of them are in the AP top preseason top 10 this year. Those are your like second year in a college going to start, and Alonza Barnett, it looks like that's insane.
And I don't mean to diminish Alonza by any means. He could very well be our week 1 starter, and if he is, there's a potential he goes down as one of, if not the best JMU quarterback. I'm not trying to argue that part. I'm not trying to diminish him when I say this. He was recruited to be an FCS quarterback. He was recruited when JMU still wasn't 100% sure. Maybe they knew behind the scenes, but from the outside, it seemed like he had been recruited to be an FCS quarterback.
Yeah, so he's obviously got a ton of talent, right, to be in the mix with McLeod and sort of trending toward being the favorite, especially when teams that are credible, right? These teams that were in the top 25 last year. It's a list of like really good football teams. You have like the obvious national title contenders, but you go farther down the list, you look at like Wake Forest, which is probably rebuilding. They have Mitch Griffiths, Brett Griffiths' brother, but he's a redshirt sophomore and he played a little bit last year. Other redshirt sophomores, Quinn Ewers at Texas, right? A guy who's just a stud. Drake May at North Carolina is a redshirt sophomore. Like, to play as a young quarterback for a team that was ranked last season is, you have to be an elite level talent. Like JMU is looking to win 8, 9, 10 games, maybe more in 2023. To be only like 19 years old and competing for that job and like trending toward being the starter is unbelievable. And I don't know if it's been framed by the media or fans like that. Like there's this idea that like, oh, Alonza Barnett in 2 or 3 years could be really good. If he starts this year, he's like a star now.
He has the potential to have his first FBS pass be against UVA in Scott Stadium.
Right. He's never thrown a pass, and he won't throw a pass against an FBS team until that game, if he's assuming he's the starter.
Like, that's mine, but like it's all, yeah, you're right. It is just mind-boggling. And like talking with a lot of people around the program, it seemed that this by no means is what is McLeod's job to lose. It's by no means like a clear-cut thing, and that Barnett has really, really impressed, and that Cignetti bringing him up, especially yesterday after that scrimmage, seems to show that it is going to be Barnett as QB1. against Bucknell and against UVA. And that may be the right choice, but it is just mind-boggling why he went out and got Jordan McLeod. Like, there's so many things around this that I can't wrap my head around fully.
I think the McLeod thing makes a lot of sense, though. He was pretty good. He's super athletic. I think he would fit well in the system. Like, Barnett has to be having the most insane camp to be beating him out. I still think McLeod's really good. Like, I think they brought him and probably like, yeah, he's probably our starter, and we'll let Barnett compete with him. And then they come in the spring and they were like, wow, he looks maybe, better than we expected. Like, I think Signetti had some comment in the spring about, like, it's amazing what a guy does when he knows he has an opportunity to compete for the job. Like, I imagine he had like a perfect winter in terms of strength and conditioning, great spring, great summer, leading into like a really good fall camp. I don't know. He might just be a star. And you look at like his high school stuff, and I found some like weird like preseason stuff that he had posted at one point. And we'll hear from his high school coach, but like the way Barnett moves around in the pocket, sort of Russell Wilson like in the sense that he's not always looking to take off when he moves in the pocket, but he'll move in the pocket and like look downfield, keeps his eyes downfield, and then hits these like deep pass plays that are super impressive. He might just be a star, which is crazy if you're Jordan McLeod, where if Jordan McLeod comes in last year, he probably does whatever Centeno did. Like, I think he's a really good player. So maybe he's just happened to transfer in at horrible timing with like, hey, this guy's going to be the best quarterback JMU's ever seen.
Yeah. It's insane. It's like,
it's crazy.
Yeah. Do you want to head on over to our conversation with Darryl Brown, head coach at Grimsley?
Let's do it.
Yeah, we talked with Darryl Brown earlier this week about Alonza Barnett's high school career, what he did there, kind of his play style, and what JMU fans can expect out of the redshirt freshman if he does win the quarterback one competition. It was a really great conversation.
Us, we got Darryl Brown, the head coach at Grimsley High School. Can you take us through, I guess, when Alonza played for you and sort of what it was like coaching him?
Yeah, we had Alonza the last 2 years of his high school career here at Grimsley. And during his time, he only lost one game. So, I've always told people the best thing that you can say about him is he's a winner. And he finds a way to win. He obviously has a tremendous skill set, understands the game really well. But, he's people talk about how nice of a young man he is and that kind of stuff. When he puts the pads on and gets between those white lines, I used to call him a silent assassin. I mean, he would rip your heart out to win a football game. And he was tough, physical, and just the ultimate competitor.
When he was with you at Grimsley, he's in the middle of a very intense QB battle with Jordan McLeod, an Arizona transfer, and now he's jostling for that QB1 spot, potentially being the starter in just about 14 days. Was he ever in a quarterback competition with you all at Grimsley?
No, I mean, when we had him, he was our guy. That was pretty obvious. I mean, if you have two guys like him at the high school level, then you really got something. He was clear cut, our leader, and the guy that was going to lead our football team during that stretch. And part of that run was during the COVID when things were really difficult for a lot of people. And I think we had several guys, but he was one on our team that you really saw his leadership during that time, keeping our guys together. When we couldn't do stuff with them, he was getting them together on their own, doing some workouts and throwing, that kind of stuff. So he loves the game. And again, like I said, he's a competitor and he's a student of the game and, loves to get after it and play.
Yeah, you mentioned his play style. Can you take us through that a little bit? As we haven't actually had a chance to, I think he's thrown one pass in a JMU uniform, and we've heard the reports from practices are impressive, but the fans haven't actually had a chance to see much of him. What are some of the strengths of his on-field game?
Well, he really understands the game. He has a great understanding of what defenses are trying to do. And that goes back from, with his dad, and the training that he's had growing up. And, that he's been put through a lot with a lot of different people. So he has a great understanding of what defenses are trying to do, which for a high school kid, and we had him is a luxury because you don't get that a lot of times. So I know even there at JMU that he's doing a lot as far as watching film, meeting with his staff. He's just different. I mean, he lives and breathes football. So he's different than any other kid I've ever had come through here. And then, on the field, as far as his physical tools, I mean, he's got a tremendous, strong arm. He's very accurate with the football. I think now, I know toward the end of his time with us, and from what I hear up there, he's even better now, kind of being able to make all different types of throws. There was a time where he was going to throw that thing through a wall, I mean, no matter what. So now he's got a little touch and different things. But, I mean, I've always said when Alonza gets on the field up there that I think it'll be hard to get him off because he just finds a way to get the job done. And, he makes the guys around him better. So I'm excited for him, and I hope he gets that opportunity.
You mentioned him throwing the football. All we've seen from him, like Bennett said, are these, hype videos that are coming out. So there's 4-second clips of him throwing a football. And each time we see it, Bennett and I are just wildly impressed by his spiral. Like it is such a quick release, tight spiral. So I got to ask, did that come to high school or did you teach that into him?
No, when like I said, we got him his junior year. And when he came here, I mean, that stuff he had already, kind of been working and developing. I mean, he spent a lot of time in Atlanta with Quincy Avery and some guys like that are well-known quarterback trainers. But him and his dad, I mean, probably from the time Alonza was, 11 years old, have really kind of went all in on the quarterback deal. And, I mean, he's year-round working at that craft. And, so it's something that's been years in the making for him. But he does have a quick release. He does throw a really good spiral, a good ball. But I think even stuff I've watched when he's there, I mean, he's obviously just because he's getting stronger and stuff. I mean, he's even better now, obviously. So he's worked years for this opportunity.
I always love talking to high school coaches about players who go on to play in college because those guys typically have some super impressive high school stories. I was curious if there were any individual performances or games that really stand out with Alonza where you're like, wow, that guy was a star.
Well, there's a few, but the first game that he played for us, we didn't really. I mean, we knew he was a tremendous talent, but we just, you don't really know how it's going to be until the lights come on, obviously. And it was during the COVID year we played in the spring, so our first game that season was on a cold Friday night in February, and we were on the road, and everybody had canceled their games in the state or played them on a Thursday because it was about 30 degrees and it was raining sideways, and we were actually playing on a turf field down towards Charlotte. So the school we were playing at played, and that night was some of the worst conditions I've ever been a part of anywhere. And he went out, threw a couple of touchdowns, and then made a huge touchdown run in the second half where he ran over a defender and got into the end zone. And we kind of knew right then that we were dealing with somebody different, and then the rest of the way, I mean, he was much the same. The bigger the game, the better he played. And he had a game like that in the state semifinals against a good Butler team out of Charlotte, where he made just some unbelievable throws when we were backed up in our own end zone. And then, like his senior year, the conference championship game over at Northern Guilford, they were undefeated. We were undefeated. And that whole night, just scramble, run, throw, whatever we needed. And we won 42-36, come back late. And he picked up a huge first down late in the game with his legs to run the clock out. But just all those things go back to what I talked about at the beginning. He would not let us lose. He refused to let our football team lose. And you could see it in his eyes. You could hear it in his voice. And again, just the ultimate competitor.
That's awesome. If Alonza's named that quarterback one, and for week one, or more importantly, I guess week two against UVA when JMU goes to Charlottesville, what are you most excited to see out of him when he does take over control of the offense?
Well, whenever he gets that opportunity, I mean, I know how hard he's worked to have a shot, and I know he's still young too. So I mean, redshirt freshman, and there's not many redshirt freshmen starting quarterbacks anywhere in college football. So, you know, but if he gets the opportunity, I know he'll be ready for it. So I'm just excited to see him be able to perform and do what he's, been trained to do and what he's worked for. So, and, I've made a comment here multiple times, and I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier with you guys. I feel like whenever he gets that shot and he gets on the field, that it'll be really hard to take him off, because he's a winner. And I don't know any coach anywhere that don't want to win. So he's the kind of guy that, finds ways to win. And, you can't beat that.
Yeah, I think you're speaking the coach language when I think Signetti understands exactly what you're saying when you say all Alonza knows how to do is win. I think that's a big reason why he's probably still in this quarterback running and giving Jordan McLeod everything he can handle. And from some reports, it seems like Barnett's now the leader in the clubhouse.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, I'm happy for him. So I've talked to him a little bit. I talked to his dad pretty regular. So, I knew he was in the hunt and he's in the running there. So, like I said, I know he's going to work hard. If they go with him, that I think they'll make a good choice.
That's awesome. Last question for me. I was just curious, I guess, what kind of offensive scheme you guys had with him. It sounds like he was able to do a lot sort of running and passing. I was curious what the philosophies were that he was working with in high school.
Yeah, he had some good talent around him. I mean, we had a tight end, H-back kind of guy that now plays at Northwestern University. He was a real good player. He had two outside receivers that were, Division II type football players. So that's pretty good at the high school level as well. And then we had a running back that's playing junior college ball now. But we were a spread offense, just basically what you see, no huddle. Not necessarily up tempo, had the ability to be up tempo, but did a lot of scanning and checking with the sideline to try to get in the right play. Alonzo would have some flexibility at times to get us in something if need be that maybe he saw out there that was good. We obviously trusted him, but we RPO based. We had a lot of RPO stuff, and then obviously had some design quarterback runs in as well because taking advantage of his legs. Not that he was necessarily would outrun people, but Alonzo did a great job of, he could run through tackles. He was strong. He was physical and getting the yards that you need. And the best thing he does is manipulate the pocket. When we had him, if protection broke down, he hardly ever got sacked. He was able to kind of had a great presence of where pressure was coming from and being able to manipulate and move out of that and then create with his legs or make a throw down the field. Some of our best plays was, when we had a concept called and protection broke down and then Alonzo would scramble and pick up 20. So he just has a great feel on the field and the game seems very, very slow for him. And I know probably the more he's been up there and been around and kind of caught up with everything, it's probably slowing down for him up there as well. So it's a great opportunity for him. So I'm hoping that he gets that shot.
That's awesome. That offensive scheme seems a lot more fun than what Bennett and I's high school ran. I think Bennett said his high school ran a wing tee. Mine ran a triple option. I think we threw 3 passes my entire high school career. So that sounds a lot more fun.
I was a high school quarterback and I was in the wing tee as well. So then my first 2 years as an assistant coach, we were a triple option team. So I understand all that for sure.
Yeah, it was a
quarterbacks take a lot of hits in that system for sure.
But thank you so much, Coach Darryl Brown, head coach of Grimsley High School, taking the time out of your day to talk a little Alonza Barnett and that QB competition happened up in JMU.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Run through a brick wall. That's what I'm about to do.
I just know that I went into that conversation not fully bought into Alonza Barnett. I left that conversation letting him be the quarterback of the Seattle Seahawks.
When I found some of his high school tape, some of it looked like scrimmagey kind of stuff. The offensive line stuff is very true. Where he's like, sometimes the protection broke down. Looked like it broke down every play.
Yeah, I watched his huddle highlights because I was putting together a reel for our Instagram, and I put over one of his answers just like highlights of Alonza in his senior year. Every time it seemed like he was either stepping up in the pocket, avoiding a free blitz, yeah.
And apparently JMU is struggling with protection, which I feel like is maybe a made-up storyline that'll go away in a couple of days. But Nice to have a quarterback who can move, and I think either guy, McLeod and Barnett, are both going to be able to get out of trouble, which is huge.
Yeah, and I think not much changes with our game by game prediction depending on who is the quarterback. But before we get to our game by game prediction, it's time for this week's edition of News or Snooze. Bennett has 2 quotes that he'll run by me. I'll say if they're newsworthy or snooze-worthy, and then I have one to throw at Bennett.
Okay. First one here.
Okay.
Kind of an easy one for you.
Okay.
But this is from Kurt Signetti after the second scrimmage. We had a lot of question marks, I think, in our passing game. I'm pleased with Barnett's progress at QB. We've had some receivers step up.
News. That is definitely news. Signetti likes to drop hints at who the quarterback is. He did it all of last camp with Centeio, even though Centeio wasn't named until minutes before the kickoff of the opening game against Middle Tennessee. We all kind of knew, one, just based off of pure talent and kind of seeing the videos and everything that came out, but also throughout all of camp, Centeio was the name that kept coming out of Signetti's mouth. It wasn't Billy Atkins. It wasn't anyone else on that roster. It was Todd Centeio. And now this season, it hasn't been McLeod at all. It's been Barnett. This one time, he never mentioned McLeod. The only thing that we thought he did mention McLeod was that he values experience. If it comes down to, like, if they are both in a dead heat, he would lean the experience over it. What seems like they're not in a dead heat right now. And then Tyshawn Wyatt, unprompted, said Alonza Barnett was doing great. You put all of that together, this is an extremely newsworthy quote, and I think it is his way of saying that Barnett is going to be the starting quarterback.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that makes a ton of sense. Want me to hit you with the second one?
Yes.
Again from Signetti. Tonight, the defense was shorthanded. We had a couple corners out with soft tissue. They'll all be back Friday and Monday. They're not long-term injuries. But my question, is it newsworthy, snoozeworthy that some of the corners, including I think some of the top corners, have dealt with some soft tissue stuff?
I think it's kind of newsworthy. I mean, this is a coach that it seems like all camp has been talking about how they're working to limit injuries. They didn't tackle in the first scrimmage. Unclear if they tackled in the second scrimmage. But in the first scrimmage, they weren't tackling. And I believe the quote Signetti used was to avoid soft tissue injuries. And, like, he's been very adamant about things like that they don't need to tackle because they're a little bit of an older group so they can avoid these injuries. And now you're saying half of the secondary didn't play in the last scrimmage because of injuries? Seems like something kind of wacky's going on behind the scenes. Not wacky. That makes it sound like weird. That makes it sound bad. But like it's just weird that the secondary is having these issues.
Definitely tough at corner too, because that's a young spot where you'd think every practice rep would be super beneficial. I think on the plus side, the no tackling kept him out of like a dude tearing his ACL. So like Chauncey Logan maybe having like a slightly sore hamstring. That's a tough thing to say, folks.
Slightly sore
is not as bad as, like, you know,
a broken knee,
obviously, like, shattering his leg. So I think from that perspective, it's good. He said they have no long-term injuries, which is really, really solid. But yeah, it's definitely tough if, like, you really want to rep those guys. Also seems easier probably if you're a receiver to, like, quote unquote step up. If you're going against like backup, we've had a lot of guys step up. And
you're going against
on an unrelated note, all of our corners are injured.
Now, our quarterback too in the second scrimmage was Jack Fitzpatrick. His 6'2", 640 was a little bit worrisome, but man, did he not do well. But like, it's also, I think we talked about it a little bit earlier. This is the group that you wanted to not only get the reps, but like understand the chemistry. Because I feel like so much of the secondary is understanding when to pass guys off. It's when to kind of feel your zone. How does the person next to you play their zone? How do you then play your zone? If you're playing man and you have different responsibilities where you're passing a man off, like how does all of that work? And I think that was a bigger issue than necessarily talent last year, was that it was a completely new secondary. And they were hit by the injury bug last year. Austin missed an extended amount of time with injuries. Logan was kind of banged up to start the season, and that's why he wasn't the cornerback 1 or 2 last season. So it is worrisome that they are injured going into this year.
I think it's also interesting. Like, I know Virginia's offense was terrible last year, but they do have some like promising talent at receiver.
Yeah.
Malachi Fields is like 6'4" and really good. They got, I think, Malik Washington's a Northwestern transfer who was super productive. So UVA's offense has like decent skill guys. So that'll be interesting. The offensive line for UVA is a major worry. But if they can like keep Tony Muskett upright, JMU's secondary is gonna need to, be locked in against those receivers.
Yeah. You ready for my quote to you?
Yes.
Quote from Signetti after the second scrimmage. Quote, "We got areas we got to improve, starting with protection." News or snooze?
I'm snoozing this one. I think it was interesting, but it was also one that like I'm not buying that their offensive line is like a concern. Like he might want it to improve in terms of like, oh, we didn't pass protect the way we want to. I'd argue the newsworthy part possibly is that the defensive line did a nice job getting pressure. That seems like a very positive
You're
thing.
going the inverse of
I just
what he
can't
said.
imagine. It's like, oh, the offensive line that like would help JMU lead the conference in scoring offense last year returns everyone on its too deep. We can't pass protect. It's like that. I'm sure you want better than what they did, but like I know they can pass protect and run block. So I don't think that's a real concern. But interested to see if the D line's actually playing at a high level because that'll be huge if they are.
Yeah, love that edition of News or Snooze. That brings us to our game-by-game breakdown this season. We just posted this full article over on JMUSportsNews.com. JMU football 2023 season prediction. We won't spoil the ending. Bennett, you did the first 6 games. I did the write-ups on the last 6 games. But for this, let's rotate. I don't think we'll change that much. But you start with week 1 game-by-game predictions of this upcoming season presented by 3 Notched.
Yeah, you want me to set them up and then you show them out?
I guess we can just talk quickly about each game.
Each one? Okay.
Yeah.
Bucknell, I think we both probably agree is a snoozer.
Yeah, we can just go to game 2.
Okay. The UVA game. Pretty fascinated about this game. We'll have Greg Madia's segment here in a little bit, but I don't think Virginia's that good. I think it's a winnable game. It's also not like a cakewalk, which I feel like maybe some fans are kind of hoping. They do have UVA does have some talent at certain spots. I really feel like JMU has a better overall football team.
I think we'll really see the type of team JMU is in this game. So UVA has a really good defensive line. We'll see where JMU's offensive line is. Mm-hmm. I think defensively, the offensive line for UVA is, you've said it, Greg says it, it's extremely worrisome. It's the weakest point on that team. So how much pressure can a defensive line generate without blitzing? How much pressure can they get when they're only pressuring with 4, maybe even 3? Like, you can kind of see how good that team is there. And then you can see how good the secondary is against talent. You can see how good the linebackers are. Like, I think this is a spot where, by no means, like you said, is this a winnable game? This won't be like a cakewalk of a game, but it's a winnable game, and a game that if they do win, you can really point to certain areas and be like, that is a good sign that the offensive line only allowed 1 sack.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating one. The other point I wanted to make, I feel like there is, at least for me, I kind of assumed with this being the first home game for UVA since the tragic shooting, that emotional lift would be huge. I think it's a super emotional game for the players and the community. I think just playing the game is probably going to be healing. It's also the second game of the season, so there's the fact that they'll have played then. I don't think that actually impacts the possible result much, and I was interested to find that Virginia Tech, their first game, I think 2007, after that spring shooting, they actually lost to East Carolina at home. I don't think it is going to impact like UVA's chances of winning the game. I think the story there is really just that they're playing and back on the field is really what matters. I don't think the outcome is actually that tied to that at all.
I think also with them playing in Nashville against Tennessee week 1, and that's the first game back, to me, I think so coming back is more important than necessarily playing at home. If it's JMU-UVA in week 1 at home, it might be a little bit of a different story, but with all of that being said, for the first time in 40 years, the Dukes are going to take it to UVA.
Yeah, I think JMU's going to win. I just think the roster's a bit better. I think UVA has a chance to improve, but it might be later in the year.
I think JMU also has the better coach.
I would agree with
coaching
that.
Staff.
I think JMU's staff is better.
All right, moving on to game 3. JMU heads to Troy. Troy, one of the best teams in the Sun Belt a year ago. They were 6-1 though in one possession games. So you have to, and that one loss was the App State Hail Mary, which is really hilarious that they were one batted ball down from being 7-0 in one possession games. But you got to assume that will regress back to the mean, which is about 500. So how good necessarily was Troy? I'm not here to disparage them. They were a really good team. They were one of the best defenses. But what's your thoughts on this game?
I think Troy's going to be really good. I think they're going to be a bowl team. I don't think they're going to repeat as Sun Belt champs. I could see them going like 8-4, 7-5, and still being really good. I think this is one that JMU can win. I guess some of my concern for the Dukes would be the fact that if it comes true and they beat UVA, a road trip the week after that huge emotional high to a really good Troy team is a challenging spot.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think this is a game that we'll also know a little bit better after the UVA game, because I think UVA is going to be a true barometer where, like, if JMU goes in and wins by 2 possessions against UVA, then I think they can handle their business against Troy. JMU ekes out a win, 3 points, 4 points, 5 points, whatever it may be against UVA. I think they'll have a little bit more difficulty with Troy. South Alabama, I just completely skipped Utah State. Like you, I'm not that high on Utah State. I don't think they are pegged to be serious Mountain West contenders. I also don't think the trip out west is all that big of a deal, because they already did it in Weber with this same coaching staff, with half of this same roster because of COVID rules. But, like, I don't think it's necessarily that big of a deal that they have to go out west in terms of, it's not necessarily new to them. They know the logistics behind it. And I think because of that, they'll handle their business against Utah State.
I think what Signetti complains about a decent amount is, I guess they get back so late from that he's frustrated with maybe how it affects the next week. But I would agree, right? It's not like they're flying overseas. Like, it's a trip to Utah. It's within the United States.
And
they'll be on a plane.
Stay on your rhythm. Like, you don't have to land there and be like, all right, guys, turn your clocks back 2 hours. I mean, the smart thing to do would be, like, to stay on East Coast time.
Yeah, it seems doable. I think it's also kind of cool that they get the chance to go play out west. And I know Jamie talks about, like, branding all the time, but to play Mountain West schools is kind of cool and nice. So I'm kind of with you there. I don't think the trip out west is like, can't win. They're playing a couple hours away.
Shucks. I think the Weber State travel was probably going to be more difficult than Utah State. Yeah. Because I believe Weber, like, involved like a 3-hour bus ride or something.
There's a lot of weird stuff there. This one seems like it's probably a little easier. I also don't think Utah State's all that. They don't seem right. At least, like, I know Weber State typically was one of the best, like, most well-coached FCS teams. Weber State beat Utah State 35-7 last year. So,
so that brings us to South Alabama. I think South Alabama has the potential to be one of, if not the best team in the Sun Belt, but I won't steal your thunder here, as you are very high on the Jaguars.
They return so many starters. Like, everyone who, like, mattered to them comes back. And then Troy is like, oh, Troy returns Gunnar Watson at quarterback. It's like, okay, but he's actually hasn't been that great in his career. Carter Bradley, pretty good. He's a pretty good quarterback for South Alabama. They've got really good running backs. They return a ton. Like, they're well coached, similarly to Troy. I don't know. They seem kind of terrifying to me.
This is a South Alabama team that nearly took out UCLA a year ago.
Like, I don't know. They could have, like, New Year's 6 aspirations. The other thing too is their schedule. I think it's, what do they play? They play at Oklahoma State, and then I think they open at Tulane.
Yeah.
So they'll have played 2 really good teams on the road. Like, I don't think going to Harrisonburg on family weekend is going to be particularly terrifying.
And also, Signetti mentioned the travel back.
Yep.
He's already setting himself up to have the excuse in case they lose. Like, that, they got it.
I was listening to this the other day, just a little aside. At his post-game ODU press conference after that win, is one of his best performances of all time. He's like, look, Centeio wasn't 100% against Louisville. The plan was get in there. We knew it wasn't going well. Get out and win our last 3. So it went according to what? We wanted to get our demolished in the second half against the Cardinals. It was a pretty funny performance.
So you have this as a South Alabama win, correct?
I do.
A
I think
JMU
South
loss.
Alabama's scary.
You only have it as a 1-possession loss.
I have a hard time seeing them get blown out this year.
Yeah,
They might
I
lose
agree.
by like 14 or something, but I don't see them getting smoked.
That leads us to Georgia Southern. A little bit of a revenge game in Bridgeforth Stadium. Clay Helton has to bring his squad to the good old friendly city.
Signetti said that in the offseason they were going to use that game as like a case study because they got schematically just like embarrassed.
He's not wrong. Yep, he's not wrong.
They've talked a lot about like wanting to stop the run, right? And that's like how they scheme things up. You don't really need to do that against Georgia Southern. Like you have to stop the pass. So I'm hoping they change that up. I think a bye week in advance helps. I think they can win this game. I don't think Georgia Southern is going to be good defensively. It feels like, right, that revenge factor. They'll end up winning. At the same time, I do think Clay Helton and that offense is kind of terrifying, even with different personnel in terms of like, I think they're going to score 30 plus a game this year.
Can I say a hot take?
Yes.
I think Clay Helton might be the best coach in the Sun Belt.
He's a good coach.
Like maybe not defensively, but I think his offensive mind is just like so far and away better than everyone else that he scares me no matter what. I don't care what his talent is around him. He scares me.
He's a great coach. This next one, Charles Huff, darn good coach for Marshall. Short week on the road, Thursday night, ESPN or ESPN2. What are your thoughts here on another revenge game, or is Marshall a little too good?
I think JMU gets the revenge they need in this one. Marshall didn't blow me away last year. That was a game that, and I know JMU fans, and I say it all the time too, we would have won that game if we had Todd Centeio, right? Like we would have had that game if we had me at quarterback. That game had everything. We threw 4 interceptions and had a fumble lost.
Yeah.
And they only beat us by a little bit. Like there was a chance to win that game late.
Yeah.
And then Marshall goes ahead and loses 2 of their defensive linemen. And then a few guys on the back end. They lost a linebacker, 2 linebackers, a defensive back. So their defense kind of got hit a little bit. And that was the strength of their team a year ago. They lost their running back, Kalan Laybourne. You got to assume that whoever their quarterback is next year,
Cam Fancher is projected.
I say that because he wasn't necessarily all that fantastic last year, but he's a redshirt freshman. He was a redshirt freshman. And he's going to be a redshirt sophomore. So you got to assume there's a little bit of progression there out of him. But with all that being said, I think JMU wins kind of a slugfest type of game, 21-17.
This one might be, to me, the scariest one. I think Marshall's going to be good. I feel like they keep being underrated. They still have, Owen Porter on defense. I think the defense will be solid. And it seems like maybe a big if, but if Fancher can take a step, I think they've got a chance to be really dangerous.
Yeah, but I could argue JMU is going to take the exact same step they are going to take, and I think JMU was already 2 steps ahead of them last year.
It'd be a great win.
A Marshall fan is going to find that soundbite of me saying that JMU was 2 steps better than them last year and just blast me on Twitter.
I'm also interested. I feel like depth at a couple of spots, maybe like corner and defensive tackle are reasonable questions for JMU. How are they looking in mid-October health-wise?
Not only mid-October, a short week. This is a Thursday game. So, I mean, yeah, that is tough. That's the first ever Thursday midweek game JMU will have played in the Sun Belt, which is a much different beast. It won't be the first time for Marshall. That brings us to ODU.
Love this one, right? It's like what do they always say in the NFL when they have the Thursday game? They're like, oh, we have a mini bye.
A mini buyers, yeah.
So stupid, but whatever. Jamie's got a mini buy here. Perfect time for the mini buy.
So stupid. So they got one, right?
Perfect time for the mini buy, as people like to say. Perfect time. I think ODU, I was looking at this. I think they're going to suck. Like, I think they're
I thought you were about to say you thought they're going to be good. And I was going to be like, Bennett, we need to get you checked out.
think people are talking like opening night or whatever. They're like, oh, I wonder if they can like hang with Virginia Tech. No. Their ODU looks horrible. They have one of the least talented, if not the least talented roster in the Sun Belt.
Yet they have the Defensive Player of the Year.
Which is insanity. Like, they have
That
him
is.
and nobody else. They look terrible. They're starting a Fordham transfer who's thrown 13 career passes. What?
Well, we can't talk, man. Correct. We can't talk. Alonza Barnett might start. He has one career.
No, but you don't. We didn't bring in an FCS transfer who didn't start an FCS school.
Okay, true.
Hey,
It's a great point.
Extremely confusing. Maybe he's good. Maybe Grant Wilson is good. I think ODU is going to be horrible, though. Like 2 or 3 wins, kind of bad. I think this is a blowout. You had a hilarious prediction in the article. Why don't you tell everyone what you think will happen?
55-3.
What was last year? 37-3?
Something like that. I don't think ODU is going to score a touchdown. I don't think Kurt Cignetti's going to take his foot off the gas because it's at home.
Great spot for a blowout win, though. I would agree with that.
Honestly, it's like a mini bye into a bye week with ODU because then you're going at Georgia State. Maybe I'm too high on them, but I think Georgia State has the potential to be near the top of the Sun Belt East and be in contention to win the Sun Belt East. I think this might be, it's beginning of November, this might be a kind of, depending, if the season goes to plan how we've expected it, I think this could be almost a de facto Sun Belt East championship. It could have huge postseason implications. I mean, this is a Georgia State team. They returned Darren Granger and a bunch of offensive playmakers, and it was a team last year that nearly took down JMU. JMU had to come back from a 27-7 deficit. That lead was kind of built up thanks to a few special teams miscues, but you don't build up a 20-point lead by having a perfectly executed offensive game plan and nothing else going your way. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to need some, and they capitalized, and they did what they needed to do. Granger did what he just absolutely just demolished the JMU secondary, running for a bunch of yards, throwing for a bunch of yards. This is a good Georgia State team. Am I crazy?
No, I think that's like the weirdest trap game here. Because last year, whether they 5-7 or something.
Yeah.
But like,
and started terribly. Like started. Yeah. They were one of the worst teams in the nation.
Didn't they lose to Charlotte or something by like a point?
Yeah.
In a game that they absolutely should have won, that would have right then they're 6-6, or if they beat JMU and don't throw that away, they maybe get to bowl eligibility. Sean Elliott's had some good seasons there, their head coach. They definitely seem like a team that no one's talking about that could bounce back with like a 7 or 8 win campaign. Playing that one on the road after a homecoming game where you're probably going to be feeling yourself feels a little trap game like. And yeah, I don't know. I think Georgia State's the team that I'm maybe most intrigued by, and maybe the entire Sun Belt.
I would agree. I think they have the capabilities to be one of the best teams in the East. And I have JMU losing that game, by the way. 35-30 is what my score prediction is, but I think JMU loses that game. Then they they don't go to UConn. UConn comes to them. Do you think UConn is good? Because last year I think they outperformed expectations. They beat number 19 Liberty. They returned their leading rusher. They returned their quarterback one. But they were outscored on average by 7 points a game. And they did have a losing record, but this is a UConn team that like hadn't won more than 2 games in 85 years. So like, are they good or are they like?
I think they're not that great. Schedule's interesting this year because they're an independent. They have like 4 games that like, okay, you should win all 4 of those games. The other 8, I don't know. So I think they're going to sort of battle for 6-6 again. I think they're going to be fine. Like Jim Mora seems like a good coach, and maybe they're trending in the right direction.
Fun fact: Jim Mora Jr. He coached the Seattle Seahawks. I think he only got 3 wins, and he was fired. One of the only head coaches in Seattle Seahawk history to coach just 1 year.
Wow. Well, there you go. Doing a better job with UConn, it appears. I just don't expect them to be good. Like, I think they'll maybe threaten bowl eligibility, but because they got to bowl eligibility last year, people are like, oh, they're good. They weren't actually good. They just won 6 games.
I fell into that trap. Before I started doing that game, I was like, this might be a sneaky good non-conference game late in November. And then I looked at it and I was like, oh, they weren't actually that good. And they actually were outscored by quite a large. When they lost, they got blown out. And when they won, they barely won.
I just don't think they have the same like level of talent across the board that JMU
Yeah.
does. So it would be I would say it would be a disappointing loss for sure. But you can't look ahead because the next two pretty fun.
So I think JMU, if they can get out of this last 2-game stretch of this season 1-1, that's a win, because this is a tough 2-game stretch to finish the season. In theory, these 2 games, you're going up against opponents that are vying for Sun Belt East spots in the Sun Belt Championship. I don't know how to say that. I said that in a really convoluted way, but
That makes sense though. Yeah.
there are 2 teams, App State and Coastal, that are perennially good teams in the Sun Belt. Game 11, it's against App State at home. I think there might be a little bit of a revenge factor in here for the Mountaineers, but the issue is they lost Chase Bryce. They lost their leading rusher from a year ago, and their starting quarterback might be good, Ryan Berger.
Redshirt freshman.
Redshirt freshman. He might be, though. This might be the biggest game of his career.
They're going to be interesting because if they bounce back, I think it'll be great for the conference to have like a strong App State, because I think they get North Carolina again at some point, and they probably got some other non-conference games.
They do a really good job of scheduling in-state teams. North Carolina does a really good job of having all their schools play.
Yeah, like I think legislators have also gotten involved.
Yeah, I think so.
Like you have to play them, which is hilarious, but kind of fun. I like App State. I think they're probably due for a bounce back. If they don't bounce back and they look kind of crappy again, I feel like Sean Clark's going to be on the hot seat. I still think I kind of like JMU because it's at home, but how do you feel about this one?
I like JMU too. I have them winning by 10, and of course all these score predictions mean absolutely nothing, but I think that's kind of where we're at though, like a late game field goal to make it 10 and then App State with under 2 minutes, just whatever. Like I think it'll be a 1-possession game throughout, and then just kind of a later kind of add a little cushion there. But I think JMU's the better team from where I look at it right now.
I think so too. Game sponsor Pepsi. Shout out, Dad. Excited about that for sure.
Oh, that's the game we're going to be at.
That's huge.
Oh, I even made that in the JMUSportsNews.com piece. I put, now a lot happens between September and November, but Bridgeforth will be rocking for this game, in parentheses, probably because Bennett and I will be there.
That's so true. We're going to be going absolutely crazy. And your last prediction against Coastal is going to fire some people up.
I don't think JMU fans, I don't know why, but this game gets me so riled up because I don't think we were that much better than Coastal last year. Like
they did beat him by 40.
But like that was with Jamie Chadwell I'm sounding like a Coastal fan right now, aren't I? That was with Jamie Chadwell with half his body out the door, and they were without Grayson McCall, and they were starting someone I think with the last name People. That's a Madden Create-A player name.
That is, my dad just texted me. Thanks for the shout out. But it's Coastal Carolina is a fascinating team, right? New coach. They still have McCall. The JMU fans think they're like, I kind of agree here where JMU fans are like, yeah, we blew them out. We're just a way better program. Probably not true. Like with McCall, they're a different team. They're going to improve. It's in South Carolina, not actually near
Conway.
The beach because they're
it's in
frauds,
Conway.
but yeah, like they were fraudulent last year, but they're not bad. Like when I say fraudulent, they didn't deserve to be like whatever they were, 9-1 to start. But they're not bad. Like they should be good again this year.
100%. And this will be likely them playing for a spot in the Sun Belt Championship, right? And like you're at home and you can avenge this loss where they were celebrating, saying they were the kings of the East in front of you after blowing you out. But like these last 2 games, not only are they good teams, but there's this revenge factor in both of them, which is a very real thing. And I think JMU loses one of these 2, and I think it's at Coastal. I think they lose by, I put 7. I wouldn't be surprised if they lose by 2 possessions, though.
Wow. It'll be an interesting game. Another one, too, where if there aren't enough 6-6 teams and there's sort of that idea that they're going to get a bowl, maybe a little less motivating than last year where JMU clearly had no chance of playing in the postseason. It was a home game to finish it out, right? You're probably not bringing a bunch of Kings of the East signs to South Carolina. Maybe you are. I don't know. Just like storing those on the sideline just in case. That seems maybe a little bit unlikely.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you want to bring in Greg Madia?
Yeah. We talked to Greg about UVA September 9th. We're excited for it. We've tried to give some fans a little insight into what UVA will look like for that game. I'm sure he'll be busy all over the place on game week, so we figured we would do it now with camp over, get those insights, and I'm sure we'll have some other significant UVA coverage and or guest during game week. Very special guest, Greg Madia of the Charlottesville Daily Progress and formerly of the Daily News Record in Harrisonburg. Greg, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, Bennett, Jack, your faces to be with you guys. Haven't talked to you guys in a while. Good to see you though.
Yeah, we're amped to have you on. You obviously know JMU and UVA probably better than most reporters across the state. So you've got a ton of insights there. And I think JMU fans and maybe even Kurt Signetti with some recent comments is kind of looking past Bucknell. So we're all kind of eyes on UVA at this point. So we're excited for your insights on the program.
Yeah, for sure. Virginia's got a big one before that though. They've got Tennessee. So I'm sure the Who's are all in on the Vols before getting to that in-state clash, which should be a great game down the road on September 9th.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's kind of hilarious, the difference in schedules where JMU has an FCS team that was, I think, picked to finish last in the Patriot League, not even a full scholarship, and then UVA on the other side, they have a Tennessee team that is looking to have one of the best seasons in recent memory, and it's just like, oh, what a complete difference. We've already thrown out one game where UVA fans probably haven't even thought about JMU once during this offseason when there's Tennessee first.
Yeah, I will say I think the Virginia fan base knows what James Madison has built on the other side of the mountain, right? I think there's some respect there for what James Madison has done, not only in their final half decade or so at the FCS level, but also what they did last year in their debut season as an FBS member. So I don't want to say out of sight, out of mind with Virginia fans, but certainly the focus for the UVA fan base is on this first one, right? It'll be their first game post tragedy. What happened this past November on grounds as they call it in Charlottesville with the shooting that involved the Devin Chandler, Lavelle Davis Jr. and Deshaun Perry. So sad. It'll be their first game when they play Tennessee in Nashville on September 2nd. So a lot of emotion will be going into that one for the Who's before they open up their home slate against the Dukes.
Yeah, that's a great point. I was interested from your perspective how the team has sort of used that maybe as a motivating factor. Obviously, you've got returners, but then you also have some transfers who weren't with the program that have sort of, I guess, maybe assimilated since then.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And you don't have to look any further than Mike Hollins, the running back and surviving victim of that tragedy, right? Went through a ton of, stuff in the hospital where he had to get his gunshot wounds healed in his stomach and just fight to get back on a football field. Obviously, doctors had told him it might be a few months before he can put his socks on. And in a matter of months, he was back on a practice field practicing during the spring. So it's an incredible story, inspirational story. And I think the team looks at him as their inspiration in addition to the friends and teammates that they lost in Chandler, Davis, and Perry. I think Tony Elliott, the second-year coach at Virginia, former Clemson offensive coordinator, he also gained a lot of respect from within the locker room about how he handled everything in times of tragedy. Last year on the field for Virginia, was not great. 3-7, a lot of changes, offensive scheme, defensive scheme. The offense, which was exciting, and Bennett, this from covering them a little bit, was exciting with Robert and I and Brennan Armstrong and slinging the ball all over the yard there for a little bit. And frankly, last year it wasn't. So it was a tough first on the field year, but when the tragedy happened, Elliott, he did a really admirable job of leading them through, and they're still dealing with it, right? It doesn't go away just because a new season is here. He's done a really good job leading the team, and I've had a couple of players tell me that, that they're willing to play for Elliott. They're willing to run through a wall for Elliott because of the way he handled everything. And I think that's important to remember as some new faces have come into Virginia, some old faces have left, right? Armstrong's now at NC State. The Nick Jackson, the former standout linebacker, he's now at Iowa. Some older players that were on that team are gone. But the guys who stayed are really, really bought into what Elliott's vision is and want to play for him and want to get it right, not only for him, but for the teammates they lost and for Hollins too, who fought so hard, and then for themselves who've been dealing with a lot, mentally, and then of course on the field too, want to get it right.
Yeah, you mentioned a few of the guys who left. Armstrong, the biggest name of them all. They brought in Tony Muskett. Kind of a lot of storylines throughout this offseason around the quarterback position with UVA. What can JMU fans expect for UVA's game against Tennessee, but then also the game against JMU when Tony Muskett takes that first snap under center?
Yeah, it'll be interesting. He as soon as he came to Virginia, arrived from Monmouth in January, he was kind of atop the depth chart there. It appeared he'd be the favorite to win the job, but would have to battle for it to get it. In the spring, there was, I don't even know if you can call it a battle. There was a little bit of a competition when Jay Woolfolk was able to participate in football. At the time, Jay Woolfolk was still trying to do both the football and the baseball. He's a star reliever for the baseball team. And he pitched really, really well. He's awesome. I cover baseball too. And it's like, you see 97 on the gun with the fastball and then a wipeout slider. It's like, that he's got a pretty good shot in baseball. So he actually made the decision over the summer to just focus on baseball, which took himself out of the quarterback competition, obviously. So Muskett, clear-cut starter at that point in the summer, though Elliott, didn't announce anything until earlier this week when he named Muskett the starter. He had to battle a little bit with Anthony Calandria, a freshman. But Muskett, I think what you're getting is somebody with experience, albeit at the FCS level at Monmouth. Played really, really well there for 3 seasons, which included a shortened COVID season. That spring year that James Madison played in too. He had played that spring for Monmouth. 51 touchdowns compared to 16 interceptions in his 3 seasons there. 2-time, all Big South player. Last year in the CAA, right? Monmouth moved up to the CAA a year ago, and he said that was he had told me he thought that was good for his development. A little bit tougher competition in the CAA than the Big South. Now he's making another jump from the CAA to the Power 5 and the ACC. So I think he realizes he's probably got to get rid of the ball quicker. He said just in practice, he can tell from playing against Virginia's defensive line how quick the defensive line gets back there compared to what it is at the FCS level. So that's something to watch. And as far as how he'll perform, right, it's as good a question as there is. When he takes the field in Nashville, he'll be playing against a crowd that I think I added it up. It's like 3.5 times larger than the biggest crowd he's ever played in front of.
Nice.
It'll be interesting to see how it pans out. But he's mature. He understands the opportunity he has, and it's not like Virginia was his only offer out of the portal. He had some Group of 5 offers. Missouri was involved as well and offered. So he wasn't just a guy looking for a place to play and hoping that he could get an FBS offer. He had other opportunities and chose Virginia, chose to play in his home state.
Nice to have a coach who names a starting quarterback before September. That's cool. From covering James Madison and Kurt Signetti, he'll hint at it though. He'll hint at it and tell you how it'll feel. I covering the Ben DiNucci, Cole Johnson battle, and then what was it, Cole Johnson, and I can't even remember who it was. A couple of years after that,
who was it that next time?
It was kind of Cole's job to lose.
Yeah. But yeah, I think
spring season, the spring season. And
Gage.
Oh yeah,
Maloney,
Gage
that's
Maloney.
Right. So there you go. He'll hint at it. So I guess whoever's playing better between Alonza Barnett and the Arizona transfer McLeod will be who gets that job.
Starting to do some Barnett hits, so we'll see if that comes to fruition. I think that was unexpected, but interesting for sure. I know when Jamie fans look at UVA, there's obviously excitement about possibly winning the game, but maybe not a lot of knowledge of like where Virginia is strong, where Virginia has some questions. Can you take us through some of those overarching position groups and sort of where you see strengths and where you might see some question marks?
Yeah, and I think for the Virginia fan base too, it's like if this team's going to improve upon the 3-7 mark that it registered last year, you got to look at that defense and particularly the defensive line. The defense was much improved under John Rudzinski, the coordinator who joined Tony Elliott's staff after being at Air Force and being the defensive coordinator for the Falcons there. They did a really good job, lowered the points per game by like 7.5 points. They only gave up about 24 points per game last year, and that defense kept them in games they probably shouldn't have been in if you watch their offense. So that'll tell you something. That defensive line is really good. I've covered some really good defensive lines in the past, and this one is really good too. I think you look at the Senior Bowl watch list came out earlier today. Three of their 4 starters are on the watch list. So NFL people are paying attention. Chico Bennett Jr. Is a standout defensive end. He's been a little banged up in training camp, but he's a player that can absolutely get to the quarterback. 7 sacks in 10 games last year. Cam Butler transferred to Virginia ahead of last season from Miami of Ohio. Really good player, veteran player, 6th-year guy. Has played in, I think, 50 career games and started 40 something of them, maybe 40. I'd have to look back at that. But he's got 35.5 tackles for loss in his career and can really do a number of different things. On the interior, Aaron Famui, Bennett, I know you're familiar with him. He's been around a long time. Jameer Carter, too, who's probably an NFL guy this time next year. Could be a factor as well. And then they're deep there also. They'll probably play 3 or 4 guys off the bench on the D line with Ben Smiley, Paul Akiri, and Michael Diatta. So that D line is very, very good. And it's a D line. I've talked to some ACC coaches that, is not only good for being the strength of Virginia's team, but is one of the better D lines in the ACC and maybe even the country if they get the production that they think they can get this fall. So that's probably where they're strongest. Where they're weakest, it's the offensive line. It remains the biggest question. They couldn't protect Brennan Armstrong. Part of the reason why that quarterback spot was such an albatross for Virginia last year is because Brennan Armstrong was trying to get rid of the football and couldn't because they had defensive linemen and linebackers running and blitzers coming free and taking down the quarterback. His interception ratio was 7 touchdowns to 12 interceptions last year, and you can't have that and expect to be a good football team. So that's got to improve the O-line. They've brought in new faces there up front. Ugonna transfer from Houston. He'll probably be a starter. Brian Stevens, a transfer from Dayton of the non-scholarship Pioneer Football League. He's in the mix and probably will be a player for them. Jimmy Chris from Penn State is in too, but he's been banged up in training camp. So I don't know if he'll be a starter for them, but somebody that should help them at some point this year. Up front. And the new O-line coach is Terry Heffernan, who came to Virginia from Stanford, was part of David Shaw's staff at Stanford. And I think what he does, I think the biggest difference in Terry Heffernan and the previous O-line coach, Garrett Touge, is Heffernan's background kind of fits what Tony Elliott and the offensive coordinator Des Kitchings want to do. And that's be balanced, run that pro-style attack. Touge was a holdover from the Bronco Mendenhall era and the Robert and I regime on offense. And that's a different style of offensive line play than what Virginia wants to do. So I'm curious to see if Heffernan's background maybe lends itself to some more offensive line success for UVA.
I loved watching Bennett's reactions to some of those names you were mentioning where you could see he remembered them. And then he just kind of was like, oh yeah, that's going to be that might be an issue come game time.
The Aaron Famui, I always forget, still has eligibility. It feels like he's been there for a decade.
Well, he and Butler were the 2 players who decided to take advantage. The NCAA, after the tragedy last year, ruled that players who had expired eligibility last season, seniors who had expired eligibility last season could return for this year. There were only 2 Virginia players to take the NCAA up on that offer, and one was Famui, the other was Cam Butler. They're 2 of their better defensive limenn.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They're like old up front, right? There's difference between like juniors and seniors up on that D line. They're like, 23, 24-year-old guys on that D line. That's a grown men defensive line.
Yeah.
That'll prove to be a little bit of an issue for JMU, because Kurt Cignetti at the end of fall camp yesterday said that pass protection has been one of the things that has been his, I guess, one of his biggest issues with the team. So if JMU's unable to have good protection for whether it's Barnett or McLeod, how will this UVA defense attack JMU?
They got after quarterbacks and offensive linemen that couldn't block them last year. I mean, even up at Syracuse, Bennett had a multi-sack game. Down at Georgia Tech, I can't remember how many sacks there were, but there were like a couple of players with at least one sack at Virginia. So I think, that's part of their defensive style, though. Then their defensive coordinator, John Rudzinski, he's going to find the weaknesses. He's a smart guy. He'll find the weaknesses and exploit. And if Virginia senses that's a weakness, then that's what they'll do. But that JMU whole line, man, they got guys that are still there when I was covering them.
Yeah,
I mean Nick Kidwell and Cole Potts and Tyler Stevens, they were all guys who were playing on that during that spring season and really starting to first contribute then, and then they blossomed into excellent offensive linemen and good players for JMU.
Yeah, you mentioned the defensive line being old for UVA. I think the offensive line for JMU is also very old. Somehow, some way, they still have eligibility. COVID has made that quite an interesting thing.
I will say it's pretty significant that Kurt Cignetti and the O-line coach there, Damian Roblewski, have got those guys to stay, right? Yeah. I mean, if those guys hit the portal, man, they'd be sought after, right? I mean, it's so hard to find good offensive linemen and to keep them at JMU for this long, and that's a credit to those coaches.
Yeah, for sure. And the last question I had that I think is always interesting for me is I hear like Musket looks pretty good. Running back room is deep. Defensive line is really old. And then their win total is at 3.5. So it's hard for me to kind of square, I guess, what's a successful season for UVA, given they do have some talent. They do have some question marks. You mentioned the offensive line. Are they thinking it's kind of a bowl season for them, or is the goal just to make some steady progress in year 2 with Tony Elliott?
I think they'll take progress. The players would love to make a bowl game, though. I mean, that's the goal for any college football program, right? When you're outside of Alabama and Georgia, which has sights set on national championships, and it's realistic for those programs to have the sights set on national championships. For most college football programs, it's competing for a conference title and getting to a bowl game. And I've talked to some Virginia players about it, and they say, of course, that's the you can't listen to the external expectations. They were picked to finish last in the ACC. But I think they also believe they have a little more than what people think. Some of it with all the new faces, sometimes that gets lost in preseason rankings and win totals, and but I think a lot of it'll come down to how well they can fix that offensive line, and if Tony Musket can protect the football, right? I'd mentioned Brennan Armstrong, 12 interceptions last year. I think about the Pitt game, he threw interceptions for touchdowns on the first 2 throws he had that Saturday. I mean, you can't win games when you're down 14-0 before it even really gets going. So they played closer games last year that people forget about. Miami was a 4 overtime game, 14-12, just a defensive slugfest, offensive disaster type of ball game for both sides, but 4 overtimes. They played Carolina to 3 points. Carolina and Drake May actually did a pretty good job against May. I think up until then, he was just carving people up, and Virginia's defense did a decent job against him. Josh Downs, not so much, but you take some and you lose some. For me, I think with their schedule, it's probably going to be tough to get to 6 wins, but I do think their defense will keep them in more games than people think. Their non-conference schedule is very tough with Tennessee, JMU, and Maryland out of the gate. What helps them, though, is in the ACC, they missed both Florida State and Clemson this year. So I think that's something that if you're looking at Virginia's schedule and you think, it's tough, well, you do miss the 2 big boys in the conference.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's certainly helpful. The 14-12 4 overtime sounds like a grind to cover. So good on you for sitting through the whole thing.
You got to make it interesting in the story, though. It does make for some interesting quotes afterward.
I can only imagine.
Sit through a game like that.
Some interesting questions too, probably from the media.
Yeah, of course.
Quite the turn of events. They're a fascinating program because they were all offense, no defense in Bronco Mendenhall's final year. To go from that to defense keeping them in games, offense not being able to move the ball is a It's a wild twist.
Yeah, it was quite the change. And that was part of the issue last year a little bit for Virginia is, they had players that had a lot of success on offense under Mendenhall and Anai, particularly Brendan Armstrong and his receivers, Dontavian Wicks and Keaton Thompson and guys like that, the late Lavelle Davis, Billy Kemp. But it was a drastic change, right? Going from air raid, a little bit of backyard football with the quarterback, to pro style, regimented timing, precision. And then you throw in the fact that they didn't have the offensive line, right? They lost some really good players in the transfer portal ahead of last season, mainly the center, Olu Oluwatimi, who won the Ringington Award at Michigan. It was a tough change when you factor in that for the offense, between all the losses and the attrition on the offensive line and the drastic change in system and principles.
Yeah. Quite the shift. Jack, you got anything else?
No, that's it. Just want to say thank you, Greg, for joining us. Before you get up on out of here, can you let fans know where they can follow your work if they're not already? I imagine a vast majority of people listening to this podcast already follow you on Twitter, but for the few that don't, how can they follow along with your work as they get ready for that JMU-UVA game?
Yeah, at Greg Madia on Twitter and dailyprogress.com for the stories. The stories are, Charlottesville paper, Richmond paper, Roanoke paper. So if you find them, you can read them.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Greg.
Yeah, guys, happy to do it. Take care.
Thank you so much to Greg Madia for jumping on the podcast and chatting things out, previewing the JMU-UVA game. And that will be it for the JMU Sports News Podcast presented by BetOnline. We'll be back next week, next Wednesday at 7 p.m., breaking down game week, going into Bucknell, and of course, going a little bit deeper into UVA as well. So for Bennett Conlon, my name is Jack Fitzpatrick. You guys have a wonderful rest of whatever day you're listening to this podcast. See ya.
Thank you for listening to Believe. You can show support to your host by subscribing to the show and giving us a 5-star rating on your preferred platform. Check us out at Believe.com and search for BLEAV on YouTube.